So one often says when you begin a program, I didn't imagine this was going to happen. How I just didn't know it wasn't in our plans. Well, needless to say, our Kaplan Center plans for the year did not include this special webinar on October the 19th, but it's very, very important that we do so. And I'm going to take just a few minutes. So, Bruchim Habaim, welcome. With Caitlin's help, I'm going to take a few minutes, give you the quickest of overviews of what we'll be doing together, and make a dedication of this webinar. So, Caitlin?
Yes.
So, I think we're rather familiar of the Jewish tradition of giving tzedakah in memory of people we cared about and have left our lives. There's another tradition that's a little less known, and it's dedicating study to people who have died, who are of concern to us. And that really gets some deep play in rabbinic and in mystical tradition, because the rabbis were fascinated that the same letters that make up Mishnah, Jewish study, repetition, are the same letters of neshama, of soul. And so there's constant speculation that if we study for someone who has died, who has departed, they too are on a journey, and our study can help in their aliyat neshama, the elevation, the journey of their soul. I'm more comfortable, I'm guessing many of the people on the call are, with the notion that it's sror b'tzror chachayim, that when we recognize these people and dedicate study to them, we're wrapping them up into the bond of life. And that's precisely what we want to do in memory of, we're dedicating this study to the 1,400, growing perhaps, hope not, number of Israelis and Jews whose life was taken away beginning on October 7th. And we hope this is a way of honoring their memories. Want to say just another word before we take a look at what we'll be doing this afternoon, and that is that we honor these people and draw them into our sacred sancta, our traditions of study and learning. It's really very important. And in many discussions, some of them quite political, I've explained to people that the fact that we're dedicating this study to them doesn't mean that we're unaware of Yoshvei Tevel, of inhabitants of the universe, many of them Palestinians, who were innocent and also died in the conflict. But they're not part of our peoplehood, and they would be, if they could communicate from beyond, very puzzled by what we were doing. There may be Islamic equivalents of it. But while we dedicate this study to the 1,400 people with whom we share that special bond, we recognize in our Kaplan Center statements that we are saddened and regretful that there have been innocent Palestinians who have also perished in the war. So the study is dedicated to those who have been part of the Jewish people, but we're cognizant and also aware and hoping that the suffering will be reduced for everyone connected to the war. With that dedication, I hope you're comfortable with that. You can say amen to yourself if you are. I'm going to ask Caitlin to move us down just a bit and give you the quickest of overviews of what we'll be doing together. I've dedicated the study. We're very privileged and glad to have Rabbi Margie Jacobs, who is our web manager, consultant, but also a creative poet, educator of heart, soul, and mind, be able to guide us in a short meditation, because we need that. Then we're going to hear from Mel Scalt, some Kaplanian and other perspectives about what's going on. We'll then turn to Rabbi Michael Cohen from Kibbutz Keturah, a member of our board, and we'll hear from him a number of things, including Manish Tana. What feels different about this war than other wars? Later, we'll hear from my friend and colleague, Dr. Lifsa Schachter. I'll introduce her a little bit later. We will take some time with the help of Caitlin to facilitate some sharing of perspectives. And at the very end, I'm going to take you to something you can find on our website, our new Israel Talmud pages that introduce some of these issues and as a resource for you. So with that said, thank you, Caitlin. I'm going to ask Margie to work with us on a meditation.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Jeffrey's been talking about the neshama, the soul, and I wanted to turn to our neshima, our breath, for a moment. We're being asked to take in so much in these very challenging times. But we learn in the book of Shmot, the book of Exodus, that when we are in a state of kotzer ruach, anguished, overwhelmed, perhaps our bodies tight and braced for what might be next, our breath and field of vision constricted, as it naturally does in times of crisis and trauma, that it's hard to hear. We read in Exodus, Lo shamu mikotzer ruach. At the very moment when our compassion and clarity are so desperately needed, the state of kotzer ruach may make it hard to attend, to hear well. When we turn to our breath and our direct embodied experience when we meditate, it can help us soothe our raw nervous systems and soften the constriction in our breath, in our hearts, and in our bodies a little bit as we make time to digest and process what we're already holding so that there's space in our hearts and our minds to take in a little more. So I want to invite us to just spend a few minutes. If you're comfortable, close your eyes or have a soft gaze. This will really just be 2 or 3 minutes. Feel your feet on the ground, the chair supporting you. Invite your shoulders to soften and your jaw to soften. Let your eyes rest for a moment. And notice the breath coming in and out all on its own. In this moment, there's nothing to do, just receive. This breath, and then the next. If you find your attention wandering, just gently and with great compassion, bring your awareness back to your breath. It's an invitation to pay attention, to lasim lev, which is literally to place our heart, our mind, our heart. So we bring not only our awareness, but our caring to each and every breath. Our loving awareness. And over the next 90 minutes, I invite you to remain aware of your breath, of places of constriction in your body. And as you listen to speakers, Also attend to your own experience. Perhaps feeling your feet on the ground, putting a hand on your heart, or just taking a deep breath, creating a bit more spaciousness. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes, knowing that over the next hour or so, over the next many days, you can always come back to your own breath, your own body. Check in about your level of Chotzer Ruach and attend to your own mind and heart.
Thank you so much, Margie. I'm trying to follow your advice and taking a few deep breaths. I have a very short focus task now, and it's always a privilege. Those of you who join us frequently know that we often turn to Dr. Mel Scalt, the preeminent biographer of Mordecai Kaplan. It isn't just because he's written his books or gone through the diaries, it's because it's hard to find an issue that Mel doesn't have a rich perspective either from Kaplan himself or reading the things that Kaplan was reading. Mel has a very big viewpoint here, Hashkafa. And I thought maybe this time we would stump him because there's so much that feels unprecedented and challenging about this situation. But I was wrong. As usual, Mel has some wonderful perspectives to offer. Caitlin will take us to those texts which were sent to you before, and Mel will do some teaching for us. Thank you, Mel.
I would be happy if even a small part of what you just said is true. Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. So the first thing is that well, I'll get to the documents in a while. I have some other things on my mind. The first thing is the fantastic reaction of Israelis and their coming together. The point is that even though we are in America concerned with Israel and what's happening, we have the luxury of being self-centered because we are not immediately threatened. And Israelis don't have that luxury. And they have come together in an amazing kind of way. I'm a Facebook junkie, and there was an advertisement of somebody who was going to the army, and he listed his telephone number and said his apartment was available for anybody who's coming from the settlements by Gaza that needed a place to live. And I was just amazed at that. I keep on thinking of the Akedah and the notion of being tested because it applies in multiple ways. First of all, the soldiers who are in the Israeli army are being tested. The question is, will they be brave enough to do what needs to be done? And I can only say that we wish them the maximum kind of courage that they need. Civilians are tested also. Kaplan in the 30s was in Jerusalem, and that's the first text. If Caitlin, if you want to bring it up, he was teaching at the Hebrew University, and there were incidents in Jerusalem down the street where an Arab was shot by who was threatened, and so on and so forth. So what he says is he's trying to develop the mind of a soldier, and so he says he's afraid, but he's not going to flee. So I feel the Kaplan again is a model for us, for Israelis who are afraid, obviously, but need to tough it out, and Kaplan becomes the model, and he mentions the chauvinist feelings of those Jews who do not see the Arab side. I'm very impressed with that. That's very, very important. And I think if we can go back, because I'm finished with this document, we are all tested because we do not want to be drawn into the whirlpool of vengeance. Our anger is overwhelming, and anger leads to vengeance. And the pictures on Facebook of those who have fallen in the kibbutzim and that celebration in the desert is so painful that we are drawn to want to flatten the whole place. I mean, that's a part of us, and we have to guard against that because there are ordinary people in Gaza who are victims. And it's very easy to say for me sitting here in New York, but I think it's important not to hate Arabs. They are the neighbors of Israel, and no matter what happens, Israel must live with them in some kind of way. There's a philosopher at Bar Ilan who wants to distinguish between the evil, two kinds of evil. The evil that comes from an ideology, which is the evil of Hamas, and the evil which comes from the need to defend, and the fact that in the defense there are people who were killed who were innocent. I'm not sure that I accept that. I mean, it's people are killed in any case. But the point is that we need to understand terrorism. And in this respect, Kaplan is helpful because in Jerusalem, and that's the second document, he thinking about the Irgun, the Jewish organization, which we must admit was terrorist, and the complexity of the situation then is mirrored in the present. Kaplan is walking down the street and he sees a sign that says "B'dam v'esh Yehuda takum," in blood and fire, Judah will rise again. So he says he rejects the terrorist answer, but at the same time, he feels that maybe suicide, because it leads to suicide, and he says maybe suicide is more desirable than forever being hounded and degraded. So the mentality of the terrorist, which is so difficult to understand, we may have an entrance to that in thinking about, with Kaplan, thinking about his ambivalent attitude towards the Irgun. The problem is that Bibi has not, and the government has not been able to understand how to destroy terrorism, because you don't destroy it by killing the leaders, because they're only people who take their place. And so it seems to me, the primary issue of the moment is how to destroy terrorism, which is really, really not clear, because vengeance only breeds hate, and hate only breeds destruction. We need to find another way, which I'm not sure about. I was very encouraged by an article that appeared in the Israeli Times the other day, which was called "The Day After," written by a fellow named Ron Skolnick, who was saying that there will be a time, hopefully in the not distant future, when the fighting will cease, and then we need to think about what happens after that. And he mentions two organizations which are becoming increasingly important. One by Yossi Beilin, called the Holy Land Confederation, and I advise you to find that on the internet and see what they are doing because Beilin is working for a two-state solution, which will ultimately bring a lasting peace to Israel, which is what we all pray for.
Are you going to share those words of hope from Havel that your spouse turned you towards?
Well,
or
I
do you
don't
want
have
to
that readily available. Galen
Okay.
has that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for this then. We are very appreciative. Very good. So I would now.
The last part of that, that's from Vladislav Havel, when he was in prison. That's what I'm impressed with. And if you look at the last, what he said, hope in this deep and powerful sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, or willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success, but rather the ability to work for something because it is good. That's the essence of hope. And there's nothing better than peace, and which allows all people to live their lives normally, and not because we think it's easy and because it's going to succeed, but because it's good. That's what Havel says, and that's what we must remember.
Thank you, Mel. Toda. I am now going to turn to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Michael Cohen, who is a member of the Kaplan Center Board, and over the last year has gained some justifiable notoriety as the Torah commentator for the Jerusalem Post. And Michael, it's always great to be with you and hear your perspective now coming from Kibbutz Keturah. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey, and everyone. And I say this with the permission of all the other people from Israel on this, who probably have more to say than I do. Where to begin? Simchat Torah, Shabbat morning. I'm in the synagogue. There's somebody across the sanctuary from me, and I hear in whispered tones, attack, terrorism, Gaza, war. And she came over to explain what she was saying, and I didn't need her to explain. I could tell by the tone that it was not good. And as the day unraveled, it became clearer and clearer where we were headed to and what was happening. And by the next day, we really knew the horror that had taken place. And I guess I want to say this was not, a moment of liberation, what Hamas did, of George Washington crossing the Delaware River and attacking the Hessians and attacking soldiers. This was a theocratic, violent dictatorship, murdering, raping, beheading innocent people solely because they were Jewish and Israelis. The shock of this is still reverberating. And I would say, Jeffrey wanted me to say Manish Tana. I would say it's Manish Tana, but I would say this is put us back. If the Second Intifada put us back 20 years, this has put us back 100 years. We're back in the 1920s now. In some ways, maybe even further back. This was a late 19th century pogrom taking place in the early 21st century on the soil that was supposed to protect Jews. Its ramifications will be far lasting. To get clearly the right wing in Israel, this is only justification for we told you so. For those in the center, there's serious doubts on how to go forward. And many on the left are also need to ask themselves or are asking themselves that question. The fact that the United Nations, almost 2 weeks after this event, can't condemn unequivocally Hamas for what it did 2 weeks ago is unfathomable. And this country notes it. There was great feeling of support by President Biden's visit yesterday on many, many levels. So that's a piece of a lot going on here. The other thing I want to say is this country, as you know, was divided. We were beginning to start our 40th straight week of demonstrations for democracy against the Bibi government. That was immediately put on hold that Saturday. And the country has really come together as a people, even with all the divisions that Israel has. As an example, here on Kibbutz Gitera, we've taken up in 380 evacuees. We've almost doubled the size of the population of the kibbutz, and people are volunteering here and there. If you want to really read a wonderful piece, and I'll put in the chat later, Bill Slop, a member of the kibbutz who has taken in people he doesn't know into his house, wrote a wonderful piece in Times of Israel today called Small Blessings Amidst the Sorrow. And I think he really captures the sense of how Israelis are really caring for one and the other. As you know, I work at the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, where we bring together Israelis and Palestinians, and I penned a piece today, or a little thing that I think I'll just read from it. I think it captures what I wanted to say. This war continues to create the conditions for extreme emotions, paralleling a similar dynamic within the climate crisis and extremes of hot and cold, floods and droughts. The students and alumni of the Arava Institute caught up in this violent storm are no different. They hold and live the full range of emotions, sometimes letting those emotions get the best of them, but always returning to a state of caring for each other. The words they exchange can be hard and they can be soft. They can be compassionate and less sympathetic. They can be accomplished by tears of grief and tears of humor. Woven between difficult encounters, the students on campus organized, to name a few, a nonviolent communications workshop, played ultimate frisbee, watched a Harry Potter film, and I'm taking them on a 4-hour hike tomorrow. Classes continue, some by Zoom because not all the lecturers can come down here. Earlier this week, 3 Arava Institute alumni created a WhatsApp group called Messengers of Solidarity, Mesarim Shel Solidariot, a platform where Israelis and Palestinians to support each other and to be reminded of our shared humanity. By the end of its first week, it had some 800 members, and that jumped from 500 yesterday to 800 today. Its messages are powerful to read. The motto of the Arava Institute is nature knows no borders. Underlying these words is the profound understanding of divisions, particularly those imposed by human beings, not just on the environment, but also by our national, religious, and ethnic labels, can be transcended for a better world. The students and alumni of the Arava Institute understand that orientation and work hard to walk that talk, even in these days of pain and conflict. And I think I want to close with a poem I wrote while sitting in shul on Shabbat morning. We say a number of times in our prayers, Oseh Shalom B'romav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us and to all Israel and to all who dwell on earth. But with all due respect, I don't care about God helping with peace in heaven. There are enough righteous tzaddikim and angels there to figure it out. But here on earth, we need so much more help. We read in the Torah, it is not in heaven. Our focus is here, not there. So God, let heaven make peace on its own, but down here, your help we need, so much more than they do on high. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. That's very moving. And there's some hope in there, which I think we all can use. We appreciate it. I see that another colleague, Gail Schuster-Buskila, is on the call or was on the call. Hello, Gail. I'm thinking about you often. I just want to invite
Still
Gail.
here.
Yeah. Well, good. And your friends and family too, I hope. Perhaps later in the call, Gail, when we have some open time that Caitlin will facilitate, or even at the end where we always leave some unstructured time, we could hear from you as well. But we're certainly thinking about you. I'd like to introduce our next guest for the sharing that she will do. That is Dr. Lifsa Schachter, known to me as Lifsa. This is a dear, dear friend and colleague. We worked together for 25 years, close to 25 years in Cleveland, around the education of Jewish educators. And about the time that my wife and I picked them up and left Cleveland to come to Minnesota, Lifsa had made Aliyah with her husband Stanley to kids and grandkids, now great-grandkids in Israel. But always Lifsa has been a source of wisdom and inspiration, even when we were both living in the diaspora in Cleveland. And when I received a post from Lifsa 4 days into the war, I knew that it would be so valuable for people to hear her voice, and I invited her, and I'm glad she said she would do this. The actual letter that she sent is in the document and the link that we sent to you, along with the link for this webinar. So it is such a deep pleasure and deep appreciation that I invite Dr. Lifsa Schachter to join us and share with us. Lifsa, you'll need to unmute. I think that's what you're doing right now.
Well, there we go.
Okay. And Lifsa, if you can move your screen down a little bit. Lifsa has a very pleasant punum, so there you are. Okay. Thank you, Lifsa.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's always a pleasure to reconnect and to work with you, and for the opportunity to think about where we are and where we and what is happening in a different kind of way. So you asked me to do three things. One is to say something about who I am, and something about my connection to what is happening, and some thoughts about what people in America can do. We made Aliyah at the end of 2015. I can't believe it's almost 8 years. And we followed, in a way, 3 children, who the oldest of which came for the first time to help out after the Yom Kippur War. The others came during the 80s. And today we have 40 descendants and their spouses, each linked to another family, so that the number of people who we're almost personally connected to, and including my very large extended family here, is probably several hundred. My immediate family, that is to say my kids and their spouses and their kids, are pretty much all in the pro-democratic camp. In my extended family, they range from pro-Otzma Yehudit, which is the Kahanist party, to one who is married to a Palestinian who lives in Dehesha. And the religious spectrum is from Haredi to anti-religious. And one of the things that this war has done has made it harder to speak to some of our family who see the world through very, very different lenses. and who understand the war in very, very different ways. And I was thinking that in a way, when we talk about a Jewish civilization, that is what we do have in Israel, where everybody, whether you're religious or not, is part of a Jewish civilization. The most secular Jew in Israel observes Purim and Hanukkah and knows all the songs, and they may not go to shul, but they know it's Yom Kippur, and we are a really, I think, an amazing example of what it means to be a Jewish civilization. I want to say that despite the differences, I don't hear of many people who have refused to serve in this war. I know many people who are not called up, who have volunteered, and I think the mood of the country could be summarized by a statement that was made during the time of the white paper, when somebody in the yeshiva, I don't know who said it, we'll fight the war as though there's no white paper. We'll fight, and we'll fight the white paper as there's no war. People are pretty much saying we may have enormous disagreements with the current government, but we have to fight this war as though we don't have those disagreements. But we know about those disagreements, and they're not going to go away. So we're now on day 12 of this war, and the connection to it is evolving as the war evolves. And so I think I was asked to talk about my personal connection. In my own family, I have 8 kids who are, or their spouses who have been called up, and some in the north, some in the south. 2 who had just finished medical training have been assigned to hospitals, although they earlier had combat roles. And one of the big activities is trying to stay in touch. I'm amazed because of the technological world in which we live, to get a Shabbat greeting from a grandson up in the north, and a picture of somebody down in a hospital in the south. People are able to connect. The soldiers do have cell phones. The mothers are calling all the time. Everybody's trying to stay connected. From a personal point of view, as Mel Scott said about his family in Jerusalem, I live in Jerusalem. It's a relatively safe area. We have had some alerts. We know which direction the missiles are coming from. The building that I live in is a kind of independent living, but we have enormous support, including psychological support, worst case scenario support. The amount of support changes as the war changes. There's nobody I know who is not connected to somebody who has been killed, wounded, captured. The amount of people going to Shiva calls, visits to funerals. My daughter tried to go to the funeral of a friend's daughter the other day and couldn't even get near the cemetery. There was a lone soldier who died, and there were over 10,000 people who had never heard of him until the announcement was there was a lone soldier who had died. The involvement of everybody, of the whole country, is amazing. the building that I live in hosts a lot of Holocaust survivors and parents and grandparents who lost spouses, siblings, children in previous wars. That makes
So we can still hear you. So maybe please continue.
Jeffrey, she's muted herself somehow. She needs to be notified of that.
Yeah, she
is
did.
this better?
Yes.
The
Yes.
first days it was just outrage and shock. One of the things I learned in Israel, Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are one day. It's universally called Simchat Torah, and that day evolved in this house. I was going to actually read Torah for the first time since we made Aliyah, because after a number of years, our synagogue finally had a women's Kriyah for Torah, and I heard the Shirens. And so I checked, and I learned that the services had been canceled. The television was on in the lobby all day, and during the day we watched the unfolding horror. As the days evolved, we began to hear, aside from the horror, there was increasing rage with the government, because not only was there unpreparedness, but where were they during these first days of the war? They seemed to be totally absent. We kept hearing of people who were warning of something happening who were shrugged off. There was a sense that the West Bank was more important than the southern envelope near Gaza. But I want to say is that I think the biggest psychological damage is to the sense of the promise of Zionism, and what it meant for the Jewish people. I think the sense that having a state meant that there was a safe haven, no more pogroms, turns out to be false. And people I know who talk about before October 7th and after October 7th, as though we're living in two different worlds, that this is not America's 9/11. It is a challenge, I believe, to the basic narrative of what it meant to create a Jewish state. Very different responses from the religious and secular communities. There are people who talk the language of just say Tehillim. Tomorrow night, everybody's going to say the Shema at 7:45. We'll all get together. We'll storm the heavens. But there are also incredible changes. Haredi women have come out of their inner circle, and they are offering incredible acts of chesed and kindness to families who in need, to women who are struggling with the trauma of their children. They're offering food. They're doing things that they have never done for the non-Haredi community ever. And I would also say that the number of Haredi men who have now volunteered to serve is greater than has ever been before. The amazing response of the people who were a part of the protest movement I know I want to. You're hearing my lens, so this is how I see it. In the absence of an almost paralyzed government, they took over the management of logistics for the army and for the survivors, and finding the homes, sending the food, organizing packages, and they have really stepped up in an incredible way. But for us, each day is a day of uncertainty. How will the situation unfold? It becomes more and more clear that this is not just a story about Israel and the Arabs. It's a story about Russia and China and Iran, and the changed role of America in the world order that we live with for so many years after the Second World War.
So you noted with me that it's also about the Jewish people, Am Echad, one people, but with a center in Israel, and most of us on this call living outside. You had a couple ideas that you wanted to share that I thought were very worthwhile about what it is that we can be doing in this situation to support Israel and Israelis.
Okay. Well, excuse me. I just want to make one other point before I get to that. I think many of you have heard the story of the hospital in Gaza that was bombed, and theoretically 500 people were killed. The Al Jazeera correspondent said clearly she saw it, that the missile came from inside Gaza. Not clear whether it was an errant missile, but even people suspect it was something done by Hamas to make Biden's visit less successful, America look less strong, and that Hamas, the terrorist portion of Hamas would not be beyond doing something like that, and that people believe that is part of the dilemma that we're living in. So I want to say that what Americans can do, my feeling is that the first thing is really to be better informed than we can be from the New York Times and from sources, the CNN or any one of your favorite American sources of information, because there is a perspective that I find that only comes from within Israeli sources. And for example, the difference between Hamas as the fighting Hamas and the Hamas that is in charge of Israeli, the quasi-government of the state, they are not the same thing. A Palestinian and Hamas are not the same thing. But at the same time, I have to say that my son-in-law, who for the last 5 years was running a Beit Midrash Midrasa, where Jews and Muslims were studying their sacred texts together, wrote to his people, a new semester is starting, should we get together? Has not heard back from one person. There's a lot of stuff that's going on here. There's a difference between the Sunnis in the south, in the south, and the Shia, who are the Hezbollah, and American Jews have to, I believe, in order to be helpful, have to understand the situation here on the ground in a much more nuanced way. I also believe that it's very important to speak out, to correct it, to correct misinformation, to talk to as many non-Jews or Jews who are indifferent or Jews who see the situation in a totally black and white way. It is very important to show them that what we're going through is a much more nuanced conflict, and we know that I live in a building where we have many Arab workers. I've spoken to some of them, but I noticed that, for example, one of them told me that it takes him an hour and a half to get to work, where it used to take him 11 minutes. He's stopped frequently by police at checkpoints who treat him terribly. And another one said to me, I said, Ali, you look so distressed. He said, this is also my country. And so we have to know that there isn't one kind of Arab, there isn't one kind of Palestinian, there isn't one kind of Hamas, but I personally believe that we have to support the Israeli government in understanding that the terror machine has to end, that this terror machine cannot be allowed to succeed. So I'm saying what American Jews can do is really understand more about, it's not there are so many Palestinians being killed as Israelis being killed. There's a difference between the Palestinians who were killed because they came in to rape, murder civilians and had manuals on how to capture them and move them and violated every international rule of law. There's a difference between those Palestinians who got killed and the Palestinians who got killed because they were in the wrong place or were hit by an errant missile from their own friend, what is called friendly fire. I think it's so important that people in America understand the differences and explain them, to write letters. I also think it's important to write to President Biden for the support. I sometimes wonder, had the trajectory of the Second World War would it have been different if Roosevelt had said after Kristallnacht, this is unacceptable and we will not see it continue to happen? I'm not sure about the answer, but I know that Biden's support and the initial support of all of Europe was so heartwarming to the people who were here. There's no question that financial support and support of things that Israel says are needed is something that Americans can do. I understand there's one wing of Kennedy Airport that is totally devoted to planes bringing necessary stuff to Israel. I think the federations are in a good position to say what are those things that are needed and what is the best way to give money. I think giving money directly to some of the Israeli organizations that are really on the front line, Magen David Adom is a good example, is the fastest way to get the help that people need. And I want to conclude with saying that I think there's a lot of wisdom in the Jewish custom of not beginning to comfort a mourner when his dead is lying before him. You know that I think the social media has changed that, but the rule for millennia was you don't comfort a mourner until after the burial. And I think it's important for Americans to understand that this is the country in deep mourning, and their dead is still in front of them. On a personal note, we had to change the askara for my late husband's first yahrzeit, because there's no way we could get near a cemetery during these times. There are ongoing funerals day and night since this thing has happened. So this is, yes, that was my end.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to let you off that easy. I want to thank you for, during this time of aninut, of mourning and deep affliction, for taking time to share your perspective. Lifsa had a wonderful idea that I've been floating around. I don't know how to concretize it quite yet, of adopting a kibbutz or some group that's been struck by this tear and connecting them to your own community. Lifsa, I want to just invite you, if you can, to go back in time a bit to July, when we were visiting near the middle of July. You were, I think it was July 17th or 18th, you were organizing something in your own home. And I think it's valuable for people to hear just a word about that. What were you doing, Lifsa?
Most of you know that since this new government was formed, there have been weekly protests in major cities, and but many of us here in Beit Moses are unable to go to the protest because of advanced age or infirmity, and we wanted to be able to do something. So we organized a protest in front of our home, and it was, somebody said to me, I didn't go because what good does it do? I said, it might not do any good for the situation, but it does us some good to feel that our voices are being heard. And we had several hundred people out on our street, and our house, which is supposed to be impartial in these things, was good enough to send out chairs and water for the people who protested. So, but people here have done much more than that. We've had food drives for the soldiers, sundries drives, and so many people gave so much that they actually asked us, wait till we ask you for some more. And then the amount of mutual support is really heartwarming. People really look out for each other in the building. They know who are the people who are most struck and most saddened, and they visit and they bring stuff and they talk. It has been quite an amazing example of community, but I think it reflects Israel as a whole. That story about somebody just leaving his phone number, people have opened their homes in incredible ways. And I also want to say one other thing, which I just heard about today. The kibbutz Be'eri, which was one of the kibbutzim that was most viciously attacked, I just came out with a new business venture, and they are making digital memory books for families and for people about this time, and supporting them through legitimate work, I think would be a wonderful way to help. They are visiting some of the evacuated families, the evacuated survivors. One of the things I didn't mention, and I haven't seen any discussion of it, the number of orphans left from that 3-day horror pogrom. Who will raise them? Where will they be raised? Do they have extended family? What is going to happen then? And I know from my own great-grandchildren, as somebody said that earlier, confusion, anxiety, it's all there. But
Listen,
the resilience is also there, and that has been an amazing thing to watch.
I hope if you can't drop into the chat, Lisa, you'll send me any connection to that enterprise that's being formed at Beirut, and I'll share it with Kaplan Center. Folks, I want Lifsa to nod her head because I think she agrees with this. I think it reflects so much of our sentiment. It's important now. We are moving the issues around democracy and the soul of Israel to a back burner because of the present crisis. It's okay, we need to do that, but we can't let that issue fall off the stove entirely. That's my metaphor for it, or in the more eloquent words of Thomas Friedman, this is a battle for Israel's body and health, but the battle for Israel's soul and as related to democracy, we can't forget about that in the long run either.
No, that is, as we say, muvan me'elav.
Well,
at this point, now, among certain circles, but
right.
That's what I would say is Palestinians are afraid to talk. Palestinians who partner with Israel, who teach in bilingual, binational schools. This is when the body is still in front of you, and I believe, I think we have to get to a place where we can talk the other language because there's someone to talk to. We're in a very depressed and depressing time for all the people who believe in the humanity of all people on this earth.
Lisa, thank you again. Amen. We do believe in the humanity of all people. We're going to take a very short couple of minutes. Been a lot of words, a lot of emotion. Margie has agreed to lead us in a brief interlude of Shirah, of song, of prayer, that we hope you will follow or join in muted as I will be muted.
Yeah. Let's just take a moment to come back to our breath. If you want to close your eyes for a moment, just really take in everything that's been said. And just being in touch with our deep, deep yearning for peace, for wholeness in this time of brokenness, in this time of war. Just take a moment to sing together one word, shalom. 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 So letting our song open our hearts as we keep them open to everything that we're hearing, to everything that we're taking in.
Thanks, Margie. I would like to now pass the baton on to Caitlin Hayes with a note of appreciation. Caitlin is a member of the Mordecai Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood Board, a very active one. And I credit Caitlin, along with James Susswine, our president, with getting me to get over a trope that's easy enough to fall into, which is something like, when Caitlin says we ought to, we should, we ought to provide a forum, the trope that I can easily fall into, we're not Hartman, we're not Hadar, we don't have a staff of 20 people or $1 million budget, but there's always a way, and Caitlin keeps us honest, challenged, and focused on that. Caitlin, it's much appreciated, and I want to give it, I will only need 5 minutes at the end, so if you can take now 15 minutes. Sorry, it wasn't what we initially promised, a little short, but please, it's yours to facilitate some dialogue.
Hello, hi everyone. It's my pleasure to facilitate this short open forum for you to express what's been on your mind, what thoughts and feelings you've been carrying over the past 12 days. And I know that there's probably been a lot of different thoughts, feelings, emotions that you've been sitting with. And so I just want to lay down a few quick ground rules as we go into this. Please raise your hand and I'll call on you as we begin talking. Please make sure to speak clearly. And please make sure to talk with I statements. Let's not try and generalize our experiences to everybody. And let's also try to make sure that when we talk, we don't use stereotypes or generalizations about groups. So it's okay to say that we have feelings about things or that these are experiences, but let's try to make sure that we are talking about things in scope. So with that in mind, let's begin. So if anybody would like to speak, please raise your hand and I'd be happy to welcome you to unmute yourself. Joan.
I just want to say that I was so heartened by those words that there are Haredim signing up, that there are Haredi women who are bringing food to people who are not Haredim. And I'm hoping that when the time comes, it'll be easier to facilitate dialogue with each side seeing the humanity in each other. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you, Shamati. Would anybody else like to talk, either in response to what Jonah said or on a different point that they would like to raise? I know for myself, one thing that was very shocking was that I went to a meeting that was held by the World Zionist Organization by the Minister of Hasbara, which some of you might know stands for, depending on the translation, we might say communication, we might say advocacy, we might say propaganda, depending on how liberal or conservative we are with our translation of this term. And some of the ways that they talked about advocating for what was going on and the fact that they did not discuss the events leading up to this with regard to the democracy movement and the things that the Palestinian people had been feeling and the Arabs living in Israel was very shocking. And some of the dehumanizing language that was used with regards to Palestinians was particularly shocking. The Hasbara minister said, and this is a quote from him, this is not my feelings. He said, nobody wants the Palestinians. The Egyptians don't want them. The Jordanians don't want them. They're nothing but trouble. And to hear that was just so horrifying. I just couldn't believe that. And
do you know the name of the minister? Please. It
David,
comes from a government. Please.
David Saranga, I believe is his name.
He's part of this government.
Yeah. And that only cemented my feelings on that. Yeah.
I don't see, look, it's an extremist government, most extremist government ever. And whatever comes from them now, and I think this is something from someone who's been on the picket lines for 40 weeks, and then before that against Netanyahu on bridges during Corona, with masks, et cetera, this government's going to have to take responsibility. Some of them have started to, but we whatever the Zionist organization is told by anybody in any ministry today, take it with a pound of salt, a kilo, 2 kilos, 12, a ton. There is nothing that they can do for us now because they aren't doing anything. I think this is right. We have organized the most important group, and I don't want to talk a lot, but Achim Baneshek, these soldiers who were protesting as soldiers all these months have turned their organization, and so many of them like that, Bonot Alternativa, women who are building alternatives, they have turned their protest movements into logistical operations to bring supplies wherever needed. And the government, and I don't care who they are right now, has fallen apart. And I think that anything that comes from them should not shock you. I'm sorry, but those of us who are here, and well, tonight I wasn't targeted, thank you. I was hoping you wouldn't hear a siren. There wasn't one today, but yesterday it was above my head. It's their fault. And anybody who watches the movie Golda, well, there are better documentaries, but if she at least cared, we're not sure that most of these ministers do. And it's not just democratic protesters, as Lifsa said. It is across the Israeli society realizing that something went wrong, that they didn't take care of us. I said to my kids the other day, I've been here since I was here in 1973. I made Aliyah in 1978. I am tired of being a target, and that's it. I believe in Palestinian and Jewish ability to live together. I'm part of Donna, is, if she's still here, Donna, who started Women Wage Peace. I so believe in her movement. I have been on the streets with her too. Love that organization. And just before the war, they had an incredible program. If Donna would talk about it and send links to that for us, there are amazing things happening. But the government is separating us. I had a friend who was a Palestinian. Her brother heard her talking to me in Hebrew and told her he would kill her from East Jerusalem if she ever spoke to me again. So go and figure who is keeping who from anybody. It's not the people. The people here, I work with Arabs, I work with Druze, I work with ultra-Orthodox. It's the leaders that aren't taking care of us. And this government, oh boy. So I can't, Donna maybe should talk a bit, because that would be good.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail. Caitlin, I don't want to.
Can I speak?
What you were going to say.
Yes, Mel, you can go next.
Oh, Donna and then Mel.
Gail, thank you very much. You're referring to our now 9-year-old movement, Nashim Osot Shalom, which we call Women Wage Peace in English. Context is always important, but at the moment it's urgent for me that I say what I'm going to say. B'Shem Chevrati, Vivian Silver, who was abducted by Hamas on October 7th. And she is the very lifeblood of our movement. She's the very soul of peace. And she said in an interview with Al Jazeera that I quoted for the movement a few days ago, it's already been proven that war doesn't bring peace. It's a paradigm we have to learn how to outgrow. So I can put something in the chat about the movement. I don't intend this to be an advertisement for us, but encouragement for us. But I just want to say here that I had the privilege of doing some studying with Suzanne Jalka. Her father was a psychotherapist in Vienna who actually trained Sigmund Freud, and she herself is a nearly 90-year-old psychotherapist in Vienna right now. And she started something called Konfliktkultur, conflict culture. And she said the task isn't to try to solve conflicts or even resolve conflicts, but to transform them. Because the underlying tensions that lead to conflict, eventually to violent conflict, are part and parcel of what's baked into reality. These are tensions that maybe even shouldn't go away. But how they're approached it makes all the difference, of course. So we do have a plan, and I'll try to think of a simple thing to put in the chat right now about us. Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Mel, for this stuff.
Thank you, Dana.
Can I speak?
Yes, please, Mel.
Yeah, I just want to mention a publication of Israelis and Palestinians together called Plus, the sign plus 972 magazine. It's something that does articles daily, and you can get it on the internet if you go plus 972, which of course is the area code of Israel magazine. It's put out by Israelis and Palestinians together. And what's most important, we learn from Kaplan in terms of our desire for salvation is knowledge. We need to understand as much as we can and to get as much information as we can. And 972 magazine gives a different perspective than you will find practically anywhere else of Palestinians and Israelis who desire peace. And so I recommend it very, very strongly for your information. And I was wondering if I can ask a question of Michael. I was just wondering, is it the case that this organization by Yossi Beilin for a two-state solution is becoming strengthened at the moment because people are thinking about the day after, as the article said? I don't have a sense whether there's any support for Yossi Beilin's solutions. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's the confederation idea you were talking about, which is kind of a variation on the two states. It's been growing. I wouldn't say a lot of people, even before the war, were very aware of it. I would say this war has only hardened people's hearts, and it's going to be very difficult to get people to trust again. It's going to be a long walk before we get to. The one thing I will say is, Bibi probably will not be prime minister between another 6 months and a year. Let's say Hamas is weakened by what's going to take place. There is going to be a shuffling of the chess match, which might open up some possibilities. but it's still going to be a very long, as I said earlier, if the Second Intifada put us back 20 years, this has put us back 100 years. And it's going to be very, very difficult.
Excellent.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have to conclude and move on to our next segment, but we will have time at the end for further discussion. Thank you.
Right. Caitlin's alluding to a minhag that we have here at the Kaplan Center, that we stick closely to our hour and a half timeline, but we don't push people out if they want to stay for an extra 10, 15, 20 minutes. And in about 5 minutes, we'll open up that opportunity for you. I wanted to take a few minutes and first of all note with some pride that the issue of a new Zionism and Israel within a Kaplanian view of the world, the Jewish peoplehood, is something that we at the Kaplan Center view as requiring ongoing attention and reflection. Been very glad that we had a webinar that you can find on our website in April 23rd, to be exact, about what would this old dream of Kaplan's look like as a new Zionism. We had in Israel a conference of graduates of RRC students and members of Mavakshe Derech, exploring Kaplan and democracy and Zionism. There's a link to a wonderful article written for the Jerusalem Post by Ilan Chaim, a member of Mavakshe Derech, and a columnist for the Jerusalem Post. And most presently, we have just put up our Israel Talmud page. We have a tradition now of, after a webinar concludes, dialogue hasn't concluded, so we create a Talmud page, and here are several of the people who have contributed to the Talmud page. Actually, Caitlin, if you're able to go back to the actual Talmud page, or if Margie can help us with, there you are. It's set up as a page of Talmud. We chose to put at the center something that Michael Cohen found from Kaplan quoting Herzl, offering the conception of, is it possible to have a political identity that's more encompassing than your religious identity? It feels chaotic in some ways now, but maybe it's the exact kind of things we need to go back to. And I note also that Gail Schuster-Buskila, who's here, talks about the middle, the meaning of the middle, in a very important way, that part of the actions on behalf of democracy, joining together, brings together the non-usual suspects, and secular Chilonim and Dataim and committed Jews of all sorts are working together and meeting one another. Very hopeful. And mostly, and this is what I think I'd like to leave you with, from Rabbi Barbara Pensner's short article. She asked 3 questions. I put this in the category of, sure, put them on the back burner now for a while. We have a war to fight, but please don't let them fall off the stove entirely. They are important questions, and here they are. Is peoplehood large enough to encompass Israeli citizens who are non-Jews? Question 2, as a civilization, what would enable all who dwell in the land to thrive, contribute, and feel pride in the state of Israel? And number 3, what cultural values I love her words here, do the Jewish and Arab tribes of Israel have in common that we ought to celebrate? Family, hospitality, other such things. So that's no more than a click away. If you go to kaplancenter.org, I think Margie posted something there. You can get to it, you can read it. We're also, Margie, you can let us know if this is true, soon going to be able to create a link, or a link has been created, where you can be the Tosafot, you can add to this Talmud page your own perspectives. I know, for instance, that Rabbi Bob Glick is going to do a profile of Givat Chaviva as an institution that for many decades has been trying to figure out the relationship and build relationships between Jews and Arabs. He will be doing a post. I encourage you to also do that. And also, I believe Margie will put in the chat room, we have just begun our yearly campaign to secure the future of the Kaplan Center. And almost everyone here, I think, has been a contributor at one time or another. But if this is a good time to remind you that quality webinars such as this, and one last shout out, November 12th is an extraordinary webinar kicking off our celebration of Mordecai Kaplan's 40th yahrzeit and the 90th anniversary upcoming of Judaism as a Civilization. What remains revelatory in Mordecai Kaplan's thought in the 21st century? Ironically, at this very moment, Eric Kaplan, who's facilitating that, is speaking with David Ellison, Arnie Eisen, and Nancy Fuchs Kramer to frame that dialogue. We hope you'll be part of it, and we hope you will consider, there's a link to our donor page if you haven't yet, or if you're moved by this experience to make another donation to the Kaplan Center, it's very much appreciated. So Caitlin, I think that you can take this down at this point. I'm glad that person 218, Jolie Solomon, revealed her identity. We like punams, we like names. I do want to thank all the people. I want to thank our tech Gabais, Caitlin Hayes and Margie, for their role and their help, and also their role in facilitating this. My dear friend Lifsa, I'm so glad we were able to bring you to this group. Lifsa actually knew Mordecai Kaplan before I did, out of the work she was doing in New York with Jewish educators. Another kind of conversation. And of course, thank Mel and Michael as well for this. We're not kicking anyone off, at least for a few minutes, if you want to hang around and want to share, but we want to thank all of you who have joined us. We hope you found this meaningful. Our intuition, or I'll own this, my intuition was that 10 days ago, people were absolutely shocked, couldn't speak, only needed comfort. Eventually, in the course of time, Parker Palmer, wonderful educator, says, we need to listen people into speech. We need to be able to give them a place where speech forms organically. And I hope that's been true for some of you. As always, thanks to Jane Susswine, our board member, our board chair, for her role and encouragement in putting this together. So I am muting myself, but inviting any others who want to share some response to the situation or to the webinar to do that. I've seen a new friend like Ralph, who's here. I'm glad you joined us. And a very old friend, not an age, but it goes back 50 years for me, Sam Pepkowitz, who occasionally joins our webinars from California. We grew up together in Pittsburgh. Hey, Sam, nice to see you.
Try 70. Indeed. 70 years, not 50.
Actually, yes.
I do have a question. Somebody sent a what's it called? Where you click on it? A link.
A link?
A link for an organization that talks about Israeli and Palestinians still coming together. And this is a question for Israelis. Is that still plausible? Like, where are we? Like, I'm so confused.
Lifsa, unmute and respond.
I just think we have to be careful when we say Israelis and Palestinians. Some Israelis are Palestinians. And there's a very significant difference between Israelis who are Palestinians, Israelis who became Palestinians who became under Israel's orbit after 1967 are different from the ones who were there from the very beginning, and Palestinians who are living in the West Bank. So I was curious whether the magazine 972, when it talks about Palestinians and Israelis, who are these Palestinians? Are they also Israelis? I think it's very important to be clear about those distinctions.
Why these conversations are important.
Pardon?
Why these conversations are important. Because I wouldn't know to have that kind of clarity. So thank you.
My understanding is that the magazine is put out by Israelis and Arabs who live in Israel. I don't know the location of everybody on the editorial board, but I think that's the main cooperation of Arabs and Jews in Israel working for a common goal of peace and cooperation. And the interesting thing is that they post day to day. So if you want a different perspective on the news and on what's happening, which is reliable, and that would come from Plus 972 magazine. I recommend them, and they are an authoritative source for the stories that they print.
There's another organization called Omdim Biachad, which we heard speakers at B'nai Keshet, a Palestinian woman, Sally Abed, and I don't remember the Israeli's name. This is Israeli Palestinians and Jews who are working together for the betterment of not like the 40 shekel minimum wage and abortion rights and social issues. And it's a very, very impressive organization. They spoke at J Street at the December conference. I think just a thought. I think we're at a point where the vocabulary of warfare and conflict is changing and needs to change. The idea of winning, I think it's very clear that the idea of winning is something we have to get away from. Black and white vocabulary, I think, is outdated, and we need to really come to a different language. And until we can talk in a different language other than winning and vanquished, and that unless we have new language, we won't be able to get there.
And that language could come from the Kaplan Center as well as other places. Sure. Because Kaplan, what his Zionism meant was that the Jewish civilization should rule not only in the minds of Americans, but in the minds of those who live in Israel. In other words, above the state. Kaplan was not a statist Zionist. He was a Zionist who believed in the primacy of Jewish civilization, which meant justice. And he supported the idea of a two-state solution in the 30s when partition came out from the Peel Commission, that there should be a division between Jews and Arabs and two states. And of course, we don't accept the borders that are outlined in the Peel Commission, but we do. It's interesting that Kaplan supported the idea of partition from the very, very beginning. And in the Jewish state, there must be Jewish civilization as primary and not chauvinistic nationalism. That's the problem, is the tension between the necessity of security, which is absolute, and the possibilities of a more moral direction.
Thanks. Lipsa, I believe you want to say something. You lost track of your hand, but we saw it earlier.
No, let it go, Jeffrey.
Okay.
Yeah, I pass.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
I was going to mention there's an incredible organization of bereaved parents that includes Arabs and Jews, and they put out
Parent Circle. The parents.
Pardon?
Isn't it called the Parents Circle?
Well, it goes by several names, but it's also called Bereaved Parents, and there's been a movie that is very moving about it, of it. And again, it's the distinction that I think is very important for understanding what's happening is that most of the bereaved Arab Muslim Palestinians were not citizens of Israel. And I think we have to honor the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel and are trying to work together with Jewish Israelis. And that lack of clarity seems to me to be part of inhibit understanding what's really happening on the ground. I hate to say this because we who are in Israel are expecting a major war within a very short period of time. And that is our reality, whether we want it or not, whether we think it's useless or not, I believe that wars don't only create new wars, and there is no such thing. They're not helpful, but that's where Israel is right now, preparing for a major, major war.
If there are no other direct comments, I want to close by thanking people again and also pointing to a symbol that's here that I don't know if it caught your eye, but I brought it out intentionally. Here in Minnesota, we have arava plants that grow and people sometimes use for their sukkah. This one, if you could look carefully, you'd see it's getting more purple because it's aging. But for me, it's a symbol, Anima Amin. I hope that in the future, even next year, we will celebrate a joyous Sukkot that doesn't end with the kind of tragedy we are now living with. So with that, I think we're going to come to an end. Mel, you're always allowed the last words. You want to say something?
Well, I'm a trustee of an organization called PEF, Israel Endowment Fund. PEF, Israel Endowment Fund, which was established in the early 20s and it's a pass-through organization. In other words, if you want to give money to Amutot in Israel and at the same time have a tax deduction, you do it through PEF. And PEF has been giving $2 to $3 million a week to charities and to agencies in Israel. So I support that very, very strongly, and they're doing a wonderful job. And they have all kinds of organizations that you can give to in Israel. So PEF, Israel Endowment Fund. Take a look, and it's a good way to give money to Israel.
Great. So to our colleagues in Israel, that would be Michael, Gail, Lifsa, and Donna. Please be safe. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. And thank you for joining us. Be well, everyone. Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. May it be so.
Yes. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks again, Caitlin.
Thank you, everyone. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Lifsa, take care.